Play. Oh, we're live. Okay, I didn't realize it was that quick. Hey there, YouTube fam. Today I'm talking with Miri Nadler. She is a friend of mine. She moved here from California. When did you move here from California? It's been a few years.
We moved in December of 2015.
December of 2015. Okay.
5 years ago.
Miri is going to be telling us about her transition from from California to North Carolina, why North Carolina was a good place to move, and how different it has been on a lot of different fronts for that. So first of all, why don't you tell us where in California you were from?
Well, I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley of California, which is really agricultural. It's quite small. When I was 17, I moved to LA, and I've lived in LA for 16 years.
Oh, okay.
So if people ask me my hometown, I always say Los Angeles because that's just where I spent most of my life.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what made you decide to move to Raleigh?
I had my first baby. And I was laid off while on maternity leave. Shortly after my husband was laid off from his job, we were paying close to $2,500 in rent a month.
Wow. Yeah.
And we just felt like to get to making the money that we were making before we were laid off, we would have to grind like 80 hours a week, both of us, to, with whatever company we were with to get up to that point again. Right. And it wasn't possible or feasible with an infant. And so my husband is actually from Charlotte. He moved there when he was 9. And we had scheduled to just visit his parents during the holidays. And so we just flew and never came back.
Oh, wow. Really? Like literally? And
yeah.
What did you do with your stuff?
Well, my husband and his friend Robert flew back and then just packed it all up and drove across country.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Funny. It's funny because a lot of people that call me and then they'll come and visit for a few days or a week or whatever, get here and they're like, this is amazing. They couldn't have imagined how nice it is compared to where they're from, which oftentimes is California, sometimes New York, sometimes Florida. Florida, California, New York, and New Jersey are kind of the biggest places that people are relocating from right now. So that's kind of that's interesting that you're just like, never mind, we're just not
yeah.
back. I love it. Overall perception, like at this point, after 5 years, what is actually, before you tell me overall, tell me what you thought it was going to be like coming to the South from LA. Like,
because my in-laws lived here, I already kind of knew a little bit, I knew that like, it just wasn't going to have the uniqueness to it that maybe LA has, with that real landmark places. And they live in Charlotte. So I felt in particular, Charlotte had a lot of these like strip malls that had their own names, and it was a little bit bougie. And it was very, I don't know, like upper middle class kind of women, ladies at lunch kind of situation. And so I never really was exposed to more of the simpler or humble parts of North Carolina when I visited. But I just kind of assumed everything was going to be pretty cheap. It would be easy to find a job. That it was, I don't know, that it was just going to be more of a simple life, I guess, when I moved here. So, I guess those were some expectations, but then again, we moved here quite quickly. So I don't know if I even really had time to come up with those things, but, we lived in this like 1920s home where one of our walls was actually part of the canyon where we lived. Yeah. So it was kind of like, we went from having this infant in this like really cool house, but not necessarily safe for a baby. And then all of a sudden we were in this like regular home. It's like, oh, this is probably more what we should be doing. Yeah.
Right. Not like, probably felt a little bit like camping, maybe in a a rustic. So which of those perceptions were correct and which were incorrect?
I would say that, everything that I thought was correct in particular about the more metro areas was for was for people who have lived here for a while.
Okay.
So, you know, if you are from North Carolina or have family here and you have all of your connections and you
Yes.
know all of your people, then it's going to be like kind of more simple, like all of your conveniences will be there. It'll be easy to go from job to job. And you can be one of those ladies that lunch and just have, you
You've got
know,
to have ladies to be a lady that lunches.
that's right, exactly. What didn't meet expectations? I think that, I mean, it can be hard to get to know people. Something that I wish we would have done that we didn't do when we moved here was move to like an HOA with like a community pool.
Yep.
Just so that we can meet neighbors. It's something that we just don't have a lot in California, is that kind of like those communities with the community pool, but they're all over. And I think it's just a great way and it's also filled with a lot of, you know, people from other states too. So you're not just kind of like trying to navigate this new culture by yourself. You know, you can meet these people at the pool, you have
where are you
cocktails.
from? Yeah,
exactly. And then you have kids and your kids are the same age, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can be difficult to meet your people, you know, and that's true for anywhere that you move.
Right.
But because I think the South is very much like family and, you know, like oriented, breaking that bubble to the closeness with other communities is a lot harder, particularly from a place from like LA, where LA is so transient. People get off the bus and you're like, okay, you're a part of the family, come to my thing, you know.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. It is. And we felt kind of the same thing. And I think there's a dynamic with having young kids that makes it a little bit harder, even because you're so busy with the kids. And if you don't get in that like neighborhood, do you mind if I share a little bit about where you guys live and that whole, are you sure? Okay. I meant to ask you this ahead of time. So Miri's parents actually bought the house that she lives in, and I helped them buy it. And it's an old 1920s farmhouse that's been gutted and remodeled. And it's a really cool house, but it's not in like a neighborhood. It's not like, so it is a little bit removed from a greater community, which I think probably makes it hard. And like myself and my husband have always kind of done things like that ourselves. We've been more like, we like the independence and we want to have chickens and we want to have, you know, just like we want to be able to do what we want to do, but it does restrict you a little bit. So I think like being in that kind of connected neighborhood, I think you're right, is a really important part of getting connected and feeling like part of something, because you can fall.
It's not what you ultimately want, you know. As you get to know the area, those places are very popular, you know what I mean? And I think that it's not a huge risk if you like say, well, you know, we want to buy this home or we want to rent this home, but this is not going to be we're only going to be here for a couple of years. And,
you at least meet your friends while you're there. And then if you want to go out and do something different or unique, then you can, but you have your group and your community. That's a really, really good point. Okay. So overall perception, do you love it here? Do you hate it here? Somewhere in between?
We definitely love living here. I don't think we'd live in any other state, especially knowing just how hard it was to kind of more feel established as a family with our people and all of those things. And we've adapted to this way of life. Of course, we live out in the country. We're in Harnett County, where it's experiencing a lot of expansion right now. But just newly expanded. So it's full of people that have like all known each other since high school. We've definitely kind of had some growing pains, I guess, with my son's school, being, you know, he's the only Jewish child there and probably the first Jewish child that many of the teachers
have ever met, maybe.
Ever met.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've had to kind of, you know, just kind of make a lot of decisions as parents, like what are we letting go and what are we going to kind of address,
Right.
things. And of course, everybody's really nice and stuff, but you learn a lot more about kind of these communities that don't have access to a lot, and are maybe, even though this is a booming area where there's a lot of money coming in, there's still this community that exists here that is, for lack of a better word, impoverished or on the brink of being impoverished, but in a way that's not pitiable, in a way that's just kind of like, this is how we've lived our lives for generations, and this is just kind of how this region has been. So there are a lot of growing pains right where we're living.
Yeah. I see your comments coming in. If you have specific questions for Miri, feel free to stick them in the chat. I'm actually going to be doing a video with somebody from Austin, Texas in January. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for that question. Okay. So next question on my list is home prices. So how are those different? That's a pretty easy question. Could you have bought a home in California? I mean, were they too expensive, or?
I would say that where my parents live in California in the San Joaquin Valley, home prices are pretty comparable.
Okay.
But where in Los Angeles, there's nothing comparable really, except for like San Francisco or New York. It's outrageously expensive to live there. Of course, over the past year, I don't know how those prices have changed. If you're coming from a big city, you're going to just get a lot more for your money. That's a fact. However, I think that things are a lot different here as well. In California, you're most likely going to find a ranch home.
Right.
And those are very difficult to come by, no matter where you live
they are.
California. And it was something when I was a child, I always thought like, oh, I want a 2-story home because they look so huge and beautiful. And it's like, once you live in one, you're like, dang it, the thing that I need is upstairs, and I need to, it is kind of like a learning curve.
Yeah.
Also, in California, like I would say 99 times out of 100, every home is going to have a fence around it. So our biggest concerns when we were renting in other areas was, is there a fenced yard for our dogs? Because a lot of homes, I would say the majority of homes don't have fences around them.
Yeah, that's true. And it's hard to find rentals with pets, and specifically for that, we rented for a year. We had moved to Texas. My husband took a job there like in 2010. A long time ago, and didn't like it, and we came back, and that same year, and we rented for a year and had to put up we had to find a place that would accept our dogs and that would allow us to put up a fence because it was a pain. It was a big pain.
Yeah,
definitely. So what about like weather? Something simple like weather can really, I know like I've talked to some people that are worried about moving because California's got the best weather in the country, right? It's beautiful, sunny all the time. And, we can get some rain and some gray days, and not as bad as probably like New York or up north maybe, but it's different. It's different than coming from, especially, I guess, Southern California is probably, I don't know a lot about the different weather patterns in California, but certainly Southern California is a lot different. So how has that been for you?
It's kind of funny. I'm part of a group. There is a group on Facebook called Californians in Raleigh. So
interesting.
They do welcome people that are considering moving that have questions as well, if you want to go to the Facebook group.
Okay.
But, I think that one thing that I miss the most about California is dining al fresco, dining outside. And especially in Southern California, if the option to dine outside exists, then you dine outside. That's just how it is. Everybody brings their dogs to dinner with them or lunch or whatever. And not only do the patios not really exist out here to dine outside, you don't really want to. It's kind of uncomfortable when the weather is warm enough to dine outside. it's humid, or there's bugs. And I think bugs is actually like the biggest surprise.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's like an assault. It was like an assault at first. Now it's not so much. I don't even think about it anymore.
Right.
But I don't know if it's probably partially the weather, but I also know that they spray really like a lot in California. There's just not mosquitoes in the city. There really aren't. And I had actually never heard of heartworms in dogs until I moved here.
Really? I didn't realize that was a regional thing. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, California, they don't tell you to give your dogs heartworm medication. There's just not the mosquitoes to give them heartworms. Unless you're like in the mountains or something like that.
I wonder if it's the moisture though, because it's a lot drier there than it is here. Because I grew up in South Florida, where it's sunny all the time too, but there's definitely heartworm. There's definitely mosquitoes, so it's probably the moisture here.
Right, it's the lack of humidity, which can be a hard thing to overcome at first as well. You kind of feel like, in Southern California, you're like waiting for the summer to come so you can just go outside all the time and be outside. I mean, California life is outside. Your backyard is a big part of your space. Like you consider that very, very intently when you're purchasing a home or renting or whatever. And so I think that for me personally, I felt a little bit shut in until I knew how to kind of navigate that. Like, screened-in porches are invaluable, in my opinion. Getting a mosquito service also, like, super important. If you're coming from California, especially, get yourself a bug service. Like, it's worth it. It's 100% worth it if you want to enjoy your outside space. Also, learning to just enjoy warm evenings those are the best,
You get used to it. You do get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
My husband was in the Marines, and he was in Saudi Arabia at one point. And he tells a story about when they got there, it was 140 degrees or something, and hot. And one night the temperature dropped and everybody woke up in the middle of the night shivering. Well, it was in the 90s and they were shivering. So you do kind of acclimate to different climates.
Right.
And the other thing that I think is really important is that, like, for me, coming from South Florida, I had to learn to dress appropriately for the weather. Like in Florida, you wear flip-flops and shorts. I mean, that's kind of how you dress pretty much all the time. It doesn't matter if it's winter. I mean, now they're like, it's freezing down here because it's like 65 degrees or something. And that never happens. But if you wear layers and things like that you don't think about when you're from a climate like that, that's warm all the time.
Right.
I think you learn how to do that here. And then you're like, oh, I can go outside in January. And now, I've been here 20 years and I'm outside in January.
Yeah.
Even if it's cold. You know what I mean? It just takes like learning how to maneuver the weather.
For it. Yeah. Even if it's like now when it's like 30 degrees out, I'm like, don't need a cold. I'm just, or a coat, I'm just going in the car and whatever. But yeah, what's kind of funny is that when I visit my family's house in California, in the summertime, they keep their air conditioner at 80 degrees. It kicks on at 80 degrees.
Okay.
And they have solar, so it's not even a matter of saving money.
Right. Level, that's what's comfortable to them.
But what they do is they get up and they open up the windows. And you get a breeze or whatever, because there's just no humidity. Here, you actually, like in the summer, you turn on the air conditioner just to get the humidity out of your house.
That's something people don't understand. If you don't do that, you'll have mold in your house.
Yes.
You have to actually use your air conditioning, even if it's not that hot. It's humidity that you're dealing with. So yeah, that's the point too. Okay. Let's talk about traffic. How long does it take you to get from someplace you normally go, from your house to someplace you normally go? And how does that compare to LA?
Well, I live out in the middle of nowhere now. So
that's true. Yes. Raleigh, it's like, 45 minutes south of Raleigh. So
right. So I feel like it takes me forever to get anywhere. But the truth is, it takes me more of a distance to get someplace. It probably takes me exactly the same time.
Yeah.
because, I mean, nothing is really comparable to LA traffic. And even so, like, when I lived in LA, I always thought, if I went to the grocery store, I'm like, okay, what exit am I taking? I just want to make rights, there's a lot of strategy that happened into just getting out of a parking lot into moving traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And here it's just like, oh, that's how you exit. I need to make a left, and you just wait enough time and, you'll be able to do it.
Right.
So I mean, people complain about the traffic. Honestly, there's no traffic here. There's traffic in Charlotte, but not here.
Yeah, that's what everybody from California tells me. People talk about traffic, but they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I think it's probably one of the worst places in the country for traffic.
Well, I honestly have had more issues getting stuck behind a tractor than being stuck in traffic. So
that is a true story, especially out in the country, because where you are, there's still farms.
Yes.
So you will sometimes. It doesn't happen much around, there were times when like in Apex that would happen, but that doesn't really happen anymore.
Right.
Apex. But down in Fuquay, Harnett County, that can happen. I don't know. Does that happen in like Fuquay, like in town at all? Judd Parkway kind of area?
I would say Fuquay's an interesting city because it's small. I think it has like, I don't know, maybe like 30,000 people in it.
Yeah.
But it is definitely become it went from like a outpost from Raleigh to now it's a definite suburb of Raleigh.
Yeah. It's a destination too.
Oh, is it? Yeah, absolutely. It's a very charming little town with like a bunch of independent shops, and it's just really very sweet, actually. But it does still have people that don't really know that they've become a suburb of Raleigh. And so, especially like older people. So I often, on Judd Parkway in particular, I get stuck behind like this very like elderly people going, 20 miles per hour. And they're just like, if you don't like it, you can just, pass me or whatever, but you're not going to like hit me. So
right.
I'm going to go as I want.
That's actually a good cultural difference. The speed at which things move in North Carolina, in Raleigh, is a lot slower. Even with the traffic, the way people drive. I mean, I'm seeing it's changing a lot because the last couple of years, there's a lot of people moving here with city traffic habits. But talk about that a little bit, like the difference in just like the flow of life and how things, how quickly things move compared to LA. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, one thing was really, this is actually a really kind of a cute little story. So my brother-in-law flew in, and we were going to do a surprise party for his mom. It was her 70th birthday, and he lives in LA, actually. Mm-hmm. And so we're driving down from Raleigh to Charlotte. We're on 85 around the Greenville area, or not Greenville, Greensboro area.
Okay.
And so there's these, like, it's a Saturday, there's these signs on the freeway that say, lanes closed, merge right, or whatever. And it was like everybody immediately, oh no, I got to get in that right lane. And like the right lane was just moving like molasses. It was not moving at all. Just all these cars, and all the other lanes were absolutely empty. And so, me and Josh, being Angelina's, really, my husband's not so much, but he's like, okay, I'll do whatever you want me to do, and me and Josh are like, let's just pass them. And it was like a sign that they forgot to turn off over the weekend. There was actually no construction or whatever.
Man.
And we just sped past all these people that like obeyed this sign way too early, and so you tend to kind of feel like a jerk, I guess, because in LA, you don't merge until last minute. It's actually very inefficient for traffic patterns to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But here it's like people get in their little line, and they wait and are patient about it. And it's laughable at first. I think I've adapted a little bit to it just because I don't really want to deal with it later.
Right.
Also, we've noticed that there are a lot of streets that are like 2-lane or 4-lane streets, two each way, and they'll all like with no warning turn into a 1-lane street. You don't know which lane it's going to be, and
yeah.
that
Some
happens a lot.
are a little wonky. That was hard for me coming from Florida, because in Florida everything's a grid. You know, if you go that way, you're going to hit the water, and if you go that way, you're going to hit the Everglades, and if you go that way, you're going to hit Disney World. But here, everything's all like kind of. And and there's some intersections that even now I'm like, man, they need to fix that.
Well, and in my Californians in Raleigh group, I have a little itch. There's number one complaint besides the Mexican food is that because of the trees, you lose track of which direction you're going, or southeast and west. And also some people complain that they just don't see real sunsets. And now sometimes we get these gorgeous sunsets, but you have to be in the right space to see it, because the trees can be so high that you're not really seeing like a California sunset.
Right. Yeah, no, I've complained about that for years. Because of course in Florida, it's the same thing. We don't really have trees. Everything's like, doesn't grow that high.
Right.
And there's not many places here where you can get a good sunset, except like, certain roads where there's an overpass or whatever. You guys probably have a good one at your house, actually.
Oh, excellent, actually.
Yeah, I bet you do.
That was like another learning curve for us, was that, having grown up in California my entire life, we've got this rental in like North Raleigh, and it had this backyard full of trees. We rented it in the winter. And it had all these trees, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be a forest. It's going to be so green. I love it. And it was the darkest summer I've ever spent. And not to mention, you feel like you can't go outside because you're new here and you're not used to the bugs or the humidity. And it's just dark because all these trees. And then if there's a hurricane, like, you're in real danger because those branches can go through your window. Okay. So my recommendation to Californians is, as much as like you really probably like, the greenery and the trees, that give yourself a break and get a home that's not surrounded by trees at first. You'll thank me later.
I have that conversation with many, many people, especially about the trees falling. And we have taken down 17 trees around our house. We lived in a forest. You could house when we bought it. And we took down all these trees. We left a lot. We have a ton still, but it's not, they mess up your foundation. They were messing up. We had to put in a whole new driveway because the driveway got, the roots messed up the driveway. And it's dark. It is dark. I mean, trees are great and I love them. And I think we should stop cutting down so many, but it also, there are some benefits to being able to see the sky and whatever. You don't necessarily want to live in a forest, but
yes.
What kind of comments do we have here? More traffic circles in Raleigh. Yeah. They're starting to get the hang of traffic circles. We see them occasionally, but that's a new thing. We don't really have many traffic circles.
I actually travel a lot around the country, and let me tell you, we don't have that many. There are some places
I think. And 4 of them are in Cary. So I don't think I've ever seen one in Raleigh. Have you? A traffic circle?
I think that there's not necessarily a traffic circle, but kind of like weird streets that veer off this way or that way, and the intersection can be confusing. But
yeah. Alessandro says, I visited East LA 2 years ago in the morning. A drive to Santa Monica Pier was 30 minutes. On the way back around 6:30 p.m. It was an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah. We have some things like that. Like if you ever have to drive like to Chapel Hill on 40 at night. Have you ever had to do that like during rush hour?
No.
It's like 45 minutes not in rush hour from my house. And I've gone to an hour and 10 minutes from my house to get from my house to Chapel Hill, which I'm right in the middle of Raleigh. So there are spots that can be like that. She also said, Alessandra also says, we're originally from SoCal. We aren't used to weather. In Austin, Texas, there's hardly weather events either, just heavy rain that's over in 5 minutes. Does Austin not have tornadoes? Are they not part of that tornado thing? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I think, like, I remember the first major thunderstorm being jolted out of bed, thinking that we were under attack. I don't even hear them anymore. So, and you will be driving down the road and there's just like a deluge and you can't see a thing. But as far as snow goes, I mean, it's everything just kind of stops for like a couple days and you're done maybe. And like on a bad year, it's like once a month that
Yeah,
happens.
on a bad year, but some years it's not at all,
Right.
depending on how things go. Yeah. And it's interesting because there's different weather patterns throughout the triangle. So in Fuquay, you get a lot of those thunderstorms. We hardly ever get thunderstorms where I am. I think we've gotten like 2 since I've been here in the last 7 years. And because we lived in Fuquay before we moved here, but so flying out of Raleigh, we've got a tiny little airport. You've got a business where you travel all over the place. So I want to tell a little bit about Miri's business. She 10 Bloom Cakes is the name of her company. And I'm going to repurpose this video and cut out all the fluff and just cut it down to the interesting bits. And I'll put some pictures of her amazing cakes, but she travels around and teaches people this basically art style using cake, which is fantastic. But because of that, you travel around the country a lot in airports. So tell me about like air travel from Raleigh. Is it easy, difficult, hard to get direct flights to places you want to get to compared to LA?
Direct flights, yeah, it can be hard to get direct flights, but it's an incredibly easy in and out airport. I arrive no sooner than an hour before my plane's supposed to leave. Security is a breeze, although because I use palette knives, they pull my bag every single time. Not at any other airport, just in Raleigh, every single week. And I say, you guys see me every single week. And
you think you're packing some kind of weapon for the plane with your cake decorating tools? Is that what it is?
Yes, yeah. So, but they're actually like a very pleasant group of TSA agents, I find. Pretty nice, and it's a small airport. You're not going to like be running for miles to get to your gate or anything. I have noticed that on Saturday mornings at around 6 a.m. there is just a very long line inside at like check-in, and which I always thought does that affect me? But it doesn't, because they're all like international passengers. They're which I don't know exactly who they are, but it seems to me that perhaps they're migrant workers that are on like a migrant visa that are going back and forth.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's an interesting dynamic with travel. All right. What other questions do I have? Oh, crime. How is crime different here? Have you experienced any crime here? Did you experience crime in LA? Have you noticed a difference?
No, I don't experience crime here. I haven't experienced any crime here.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like where I live now. If I hear a gunshot, somebody's hunting or doing target practice.
Yeah.
Nobody in their right mind would try to. I mean, unless you know somebody, but like nobody's going to go around and try to vandalize in this particular area where everybody is pretty much like really into their Second Amendment rights, because you know what, you are far away enough from emergency services. If something happens, you've got to be able to take care of yourself, and in particular from wild animals.
Right. Yeah. Rabid raccoons can cause some damage. Not that you see a lot, but in the country, yeah, definitely.
And we have coyotes and, all of that stuff. So,
yeah.
When I was in the city, I don't remember ever experiencing any crime. Not that it didn't exist, and it just never happened to us. In LA, I regularly saw things. Like I remember like very vividly, my husband and I were just walking down the street after we got brunch, which is like, I missed that for LA for sure.
Yeah.
But we were walking down the street and, some guy just like, reaches in somebody's truck and steals a bunch of tools and runs off. And, and you have to stand around. I was standing around being a witness for a lot of things.
Wow.
But
I don't think that would happen here. I think people would stop the person. I don't think they'd get away with it.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
People would actually be like, what do you think you're doing, man? Yeah. Interesting. So Elizabeth, sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I've seen crazy things. Like I've seen a car get in an accident and, you know, go on fire, and like 10 cars pull over to go
The
pull
hell.
the person out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's very, very like help each other out sort of kind of culture here. Definitely. I remember when I first moved here, my daughter was a year old and I'd go grocery shopping, and my son was born shortly after. So I had two little tiny kids, and people would stop and help me grocery shop. They would help me get things off shelves. They would offer to load up just strangers in the store. Can I
Right.
put that in your car for you while you hold the kids? Or, I mean, that's just how people were just so, and it wasn't like a one-time thing. It was like all the time people would do things like this.
Absolutely.
Very, very much a like friendly, supportive, like you help your neighbor sort of culture here.
Right. And when you have a baby, you cannot, like, people cannot pass by without making a comment of how cute the baby is, to the point we had to tell our 3-year-old, you know, when his baby brother came, like, you're cute too. Like,
right. Yeah.
You too. Because it was just constant.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Elizabeth's asking, thinking of moving from North Carolina to California. In Cali, there are fenced backyards. Why are NC backyards open? Okay. So I think it's that maybe builders put fences up with the houses when they build them in California. That doesn't happen here. The builders don't put them up. People put them up if they want to. And a lot of people, if you don't have pets, then you're not really that worried about it. And I guess maybe if you have kids, you might be concerned about it. But again, because we don't have a lot of crime issues and because neighbors are pretty, you know, friendly and stuff, I think people will just leave their yards open. So if you rent, you probably want to have something to contain your pets. People also will do the electric fences, you know, the, collars or whatever. And I've seen that. That's very common with people with pets.
Right.
I did that once, and my dog used to lay against the where the boundary was until his battery would wear down, and then he'd run away. So we went with the fence after that. Okay.
To answer that, I would say that a lot of the California homes might be built with fences because so many people choose to install pools.
That's a good point too. But in Florida, they did. In Florida, we had pools, but we didn't have fences. Like a lot of people pools without a fence. Yeah. So here, if you have a pool, you've probably got a fence.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's probably just because the builders don't automatically do them when they build. That's probably the thing. How often does Raleigh feel the effects of a hurricane? Being from LA and Austin, disruptive weather really isn't common like this. It's an area my wife and I were a little worried about. So hurricanes, disruptions from hurricanes? I have a, what's it called thing that, what's it called when your electricity goes out? You can plug it in.
Generator.
Generator. I definitely recommend that you have a generator. We've probably turned it on twice in the last 5 to 7 years that we've lost electricity for a short while from like a hurricane. So it does happen, but I wouldn't say it's like a regular thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like maybe the last couple years we had more than average.
It goes in waves. You'll have some years that are bad, like 3 or 4 years in a row, and then you'll have nothing for a while, and then people will move here and be like, "Oh, it's so great." I'm like, "Just wait, get a generator." You
do need a generator. I mean, if there's snow, that can wipe out your electricity as well. But I think with the hurricanes, like what I came to understand is that hurricanes are like an event in North Carolina.
Yeah.
People actually kind of look forward to it. You get like the notice that there's going to be a hurricane. You go to the store, people buy hurricane snacks, and they like wait to eat their hurricane snacks until the hurricane starts.
And we make bread and milk sandwiches.
We get all their wine, all their batteries are charged, you know. So yeah, I think I've been through a few hurricanes, and I mean, especially since we don't live where there's a lot of trees around.
We're not on the coast. So
right, we're not on the coast, but also like in my house in particular, because I don't have these tall trees with branches that could fall off, I don't feel a lot of fear from those.
Yeah, I agree. So Raleigh hardly gets snow, right? Once in a while, maybe 3 inches or 4. I've never seen snow. Most years we don't get snow. When we get winter precipitation, we'll more likely get ice than snow, which is like sometimes you can't even see it. It's just like clear. and you can't drive on it. I mean, people come from like New York and they're like, I got 10 inches of snow. I'm like, you cannot drive on this stuff. And then you'll see people trying to drive on the highway and their cars will just be right off the side, or they'll just slide right off because you cannot drive on it. So yeah, we get some winter precipitation, not every year. We'll get a really good snow every 7 to 10 years. It's not frequent. We got 2 years ago, we got some really good snow, but it's not frequent. And then it goes away. Can I live in a car? I don't recommend it. I mean, you can if you want to. You're probably going to survive. But
I will say that, like, when we do get snow, it's not predictable when it's going to end. This house that we live in now, the construction was delayed and delayed and delayed because it snowed in May.
Was it really?
Yeah, there was a freak snowstorm in May. So, and there was like freak snowstorms in April. And so it's just kind of like, it'll be 70 and then you'll look at your app and you're like, there's a snowflake on there. What?
That's the thing, is it can go like crazy. It can be 80 degrees in December. Yeah. And then next week it can be 20 and it can be freezing rain or snow.
Right.
And so it's very like up and down, very unexpected kind of rain or weather at times. So one of the things that I've learned to do is, in Florida, you just got your clothes in your closet. Well, here you need clothes for different times and different seasons, not even just different seasons, like different weather. And so I always keep a couple boxes under the bed of like off-season stuff. And then my on-season stuff is in the closet. That was a big change. Was that a change?
Boots. I never had any rain boots before, particularly living in the country. We need it because we have mud and stuff like that.
Yep. That is definitely something to get used to. Okay. Schools. So is your son in public school?
He's at a public charter school. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess you don't have a lot to compare it to with California. So just tell me what your perceptions are, since he's your oldest and he's 5. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I do, because my mom is a retired elementary school teacher in California. Okay. And then my nephews are in school in California. And my mom actually gets very excited seeing my son's schoolwork, because she goes, oh, this is what kindergartners are supposed to do. In California, there's been such a push for only like reading and math in kindergarten. And she's like, oh, they're learning about the seasons. They're learning about communities. They're learning about just kind of like, regular life in some ways, so that, that you're supposed to learn in kindergarten. It's just kindergarten, and they're doing crafts and all of those things. So I've found that, the teacher's very accessible. Obviously, this is a strange year for school.
Yeah. But first year at school too.
Right. And we really lucked out because this is the first year his school has been open. And enrollment started in January, and they were just kind of having trouble advertising that the school is free. Like because it has academy at the end of it. And so people in the county were like, oh, this must be a private school. No, it's a free school.
Okay.
But when coronavirus hit, it was only at 50% capacity. So they're like, okay, great, we'll cut off enrollment. And my son has been actually in full-time school this entire time.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's one of the only schools in North Carolina, public schools, has been like that.
It's actually open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other? So the last question I have on my list is the beaches. How are the beaches different? And do you miss the beaches in California?
No, I don't miss the beaches in California. The beaches are probably like, I'm not a beach person.
Okay.
But the beaches here are awesome because there's always parking, and it's clean. There's plenty of room to spread out with your family. The ocean is warmer. Also, we went to Kitty Hawk, which I think is probably like the best national monument I've ever been to, because they really documented everything that they did when they did it, and it's right there. But also
the Wright Brothers Memorial, if people aren't familiar, right. The Wright Brothers' first flight was here in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
And right around it, the area actually reminded me a lot of Palm Springs, where it was kind of just more laid back. There's definitely a community that lived there. Lots of interesting shops and things to do. The lighthouses were amazing, which is something that doesn't exist in California, are these like beautiful black and white lighthouses. And you know, and the beach homes look really cool too. Like they're just, it's just its own thing, and it's wonderful. I love the beaches in North Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They're pretty. So Isabel asks about you. So do you need to live in the area of the school? If it's a charter school, you do not. You can live anywhere in the state of North Carolina and go to any North Carolina charter school. If it's a magnet school, you need to live in the county, and it needs to be one of your assigned magnets, which everybody has, you know, a dozen or so assigned magnets. If it's your base school, you need to live in that school zone. And then some schools have enrollment caps just because of so many people moving in and so much construction, and the schools can't handle it. So they're redistricting people, but that's only about 10% of the schools in Wake County. We have, I think it's 166, maybe 170 at this point, schools in Wake County. So, you know, maybe 15 to 20 every year will have enrollment caps. But generally that's kind of the rules for how the school system works. I'm going to I'll post a link in the comments. I've got a video that I did about the schools in Wake County, that'll give you a lot more detailed information about them. But all right. Well, thank you, Miri. This has been a really good conversation. I think it's been really helpful for lots of people. So thanks for joining me today. And that's it. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we go?
Yeah, I will say that we have found a good Mexican restaurant
Okay.
in North Carolina. It's called Tacos Oaxaca. They have 2 locations in Lillington, but they're actually opening up a new location in Fuquay Varina, by the Planet Fitness. So I like, that's a really important thing for Californians. I don't know if it can be like emphasized enough, is to find good Mexican food. But Californians are used to Baja style Mexican food, and a lot of the Mexican food that's here is more Mexico City type Mexican food.
Oh, okay.
So I would definitely recommend, you know, like joining a Facebook group where people can recommend Mexican food to each other.
Yeah, I will put some links in the comments to that California Facebook group and to the restaurant and to that schools thing.
Okay.
Talked about. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Miri. Have a great day.
Thank you.